All right, my friends, today I am so excited to talk to you about Bryce Canyon National Park and share with you a bunch of tips and tricks and just information that you'll need as you plan your trip so that you can have the best time in this amazing park. My name is Ash. I'm a former park ranger and the founder of Dirt in My Shoes. I'm also a Utah native and I have spent so much time in Bryce Canyon. It's one of those parks that I like to go back to over and over any season, any time. Just I'll see a little hotel deal or something and I'll just jump on it and be like, let's go to Bryce Canyon this weekend. So today I'm really excited to talk to you about this beautiful national park. It's a pretty small national park, but it gets a lot of visitation. So it's easy to feel like it's really busy and crowded, but today I'm hoping to help you navigate some of that and to plan a really great trip. So let's jump in. Bryce Canyon National Park is located in Utah, and Utah has 5 national parks. They're all gorgeous. They're vastly different. And the nice thing about Bryce Canyon is that it's really close to both the Zion National Park and Capitol Reef National Park. It's kind of smashed there in the middle of those 2 parks. And there's a very scenic highway that connects these parks. And so just the entire area is gorgeous. So looking at a quick Google map of Bryce Canyon National Park, see we're here in Utah. Salt Lake City's up here. Most people fly into either Salt Lake City or Las Vegas, which is down in here. But here we have Bryce Canyon National Park right here. This national park right here is Zion. We've got Capitol Reef up in here, and you've got Canyonlands and Arches over here. So all together, it's a really cool area. This is the Grand Staircase National Monument, so there's a lot to do there. But today we're gonna focus on Bryce Canyon and making sure you have a good time while you're there. Be sure to like and subscribe to this channel because I have a lot of Utah videos and I'm making a lot more. And so if you're planning on visiting either Bryce Canyon or nearby parks, I will have more videos, and I already do have some videos for all those places. Bryce Canyon National Park is not actually a canyon. It's a giant amphitheater, natural amphitheater of rock. And it has what's known as hoodoos. And these hoodoos are rock formations that just jut out of this canyon, for lack of a better term. And these rock formations look like just giant spires of rock. They're absolutely gorgeous. And it is such a cool experience to hike among these rock spires and to hear the stories behind these hoodoos. The native peoples that lived in this area thought that they were people who had turned to rock, which you can totally see while you're looking at it. And it's just really fun to explore this area, to see what shapes you can find, and to just walk amongst these hoodoos. When I showed you the map, I mentioned that most people fly into either Salt Lake City or Las Vegas to get to Bryce Canyon. So you can see Las Vegas down here and Salt Lake City up here. Vegas is a little bit closer, but both airports work really well for getting to this park. There are some smaller regional airports like in St. George or Cedar City, but for the most part, people are going to fly into Salt Lake or Vegas. Looking at a map of the national park itself, so these are the national park boundaries, and this park, again, is very small. It's only about 35,000 acres, which is one of the smallest national parks in the national park system. So this park is small. It doesn't have very many roads. Most of the people are going to be centered right around this area. And this is where you're going to find those main amphitheater views. So you enter the park over here. You'll pass the visitor center and the fee station, and then you get right to those gorgeous views of places like Sunrise Point, Sunset Point. Inspiration Point is amazing, but Bryce Point, honestly, is probably my favorite. You're at a higher elevation, and you're looking down into the hoodoos, and they just seem to go on and on and on, and it's so cool. But all of them are gorgeous. And then you'll find most of the amphitheater hiking trails right through here as well. So this is a hot spot in Bryce Canyon National Park. This is where you'll want to focus your time if you're hoping to see those famous hoodoo formations and do some hiking amongst the hoodoos. Okay, so let's talk about my favorite times to be in Bryce Canyon. The main season in Bryce Canyon is typically from about Memorial Day through September. That's when the lodges are open, the campgrounds are taking reservations, the shuttles are running, everybody's there to go hiking and to sightsee. And so everything is up and running and it gets really busy, but the weather typically holds really nicely. The highest point that you can drive to in this park is at 9,100 feet above sea level, which is just crazy because it doesn't feel like you're up in the mountains. Like you don't feel like you're at a really high elevation. But you'll want to keep that in mind as you're planning the time to visit Bryce Canyon, because that higher elevation that you're at affects the weather a lot. And so it does stay a lot cooler in this park than it does, say, in Zion, which is only an hour, hour and a half away. This park stays a lot cooler. The weather can be a little bit more crazy as far as like thunderstorms and rainstorms and monsoons that come through this area. Because you're at such a higher elevation, the temperatures are cooler. And so you'll want to keep that in mind as you plan. But typically from Memorial Day through September is just an awesome time to be here. You should be able to pretty much hike everything and do what you want if you visit during those months. Now, I think that one of the best kept secrets about Bryce Canyon National Park is that this park is amazing in the winter. It doesn't get nearly as many people, but oh my gosh, those hoodoos covered in white snow, so you've got the red against the white, is just so dreamy. They keep the trails down into the amphitheater open. So what we like to do is go during the winter months when there's snow, and depending on the conditions on the trails, you'll either need something like yak tracks, which are like micro spikes that go up and over your hiking shoes, or sometimes you need snowshoes if the snow is pretty fresh and it hasn't iced over yet. But in the winter, you can actually hike down amongst the hoodoos along, I love the Queen's Garden and Navajo Loop Trail, and it's just absolutely phenomenal. It's really quiet, it's magical, and there are hardly any people down in there, and so it's one of my favorite experiences to have in Bryce Canyon. I do want to mention that things are constantly changing in this national park. This year alone, they've had to close down a few different trails because of erosion. The hoodoos creating rock slides and rock falls and things like that are damaging the trails. That's pretty typical in this park. And so you'll definitely want to check the current conditions page on the official NPS website before you go and as you're planning your trip, just to make sure that you know what's going to be open and available to you. If you don't want to have to keep track of all this by yourself, I have a Bryce Canyon itinerary on Dirt in My Shoes. And this is a fully planned out trip schedule, hour by hour, has all the driving directions, everything to do, but I also keep it updated in real time. And so if a trail closes or something happens, then I will update you on all this and I will tell you how to adjust your plan so that you can still see the best of the park. Let's talk about how many days I recommend spending in Bryce Canyon. And I know I've mentioned this, but it is a small national park. There's one main road around the amphitheater that takes you to the viewpoints, those famous viewpoints that you don't want to miss. And then there's a scenic drive that takes you a little further out, more into the trees, the ponderosa forest, things like that. You have not as many views of hoodoos or amphitheater views, but what you do get is really great views of the grand staircase and the whole surrounding area. So I like to go to both. If you want to do both of those areas, I would give yourself 1.5 to 2 days in this park. If you want to just pop in and see the hoodoos and go to those main viewpoints, you really only need a half a day unless you're planning on doing some hiking, which I absolutely highly recommend. I would definitely do some hiking while you're in this park, because as you drop down into the amphitheater and get closer to the hoodoos, the whole perspective changes and it's just a completely different experience. So I highly recommend at least going down into the amphitheater for a minute, but if you can do some trails down in there, you will not be sorry. And if you plan on doing some hiking, I would give yourself at least another half a day to a full day, depending on what length of trail you choose. So again, if you can swing it, I would do at least 1.5 days in Bryce Canyon, 2 days if you can. But if you need to cut your time shorter, you won't be disappointed with even a few hours in this park. Let's talk about where to stay while visiting Bryce Canyon. Okay, so I am on the Dirt in My Shoes website, and this is my article about where to stay in Bryce Canyon. So you can see this map here. So down here we have Bryce Canyon National Park, this whole area right here. And you have the town of Bryce Canyon City just right outside of the national park. This city is not really a city, but it's like a collection of hotels and a few restaurants. But it's right outside of Bryce Canyon National Park. You're literally just a stone's throw away from the entrance to this park. And so it's a really good location. This is where you'll find the famous Ruby's Inn. You'll probably start seeing things for that as you're planning your trip. But Ruby's Inn is in an awesome location for visiting Bryce Canyon. So anywhere around Bryce Canyon City is a really great option. Or if you want to be in the park, there is a lodge and 2 campgrounds as well that make really great options. So looking at the map, this is the amphitheater section. So this is this section just enlarged. And the Bryce Canyon Lodge is right here. And it's actually just like right close to the amphitheater. There's a little walkway you can take to hit the rim trail, which goes right along the amphitheater. And so it's a really great location. It's not necessary to stay in the park to get in there early and avoid crowds and stuff like that, as it is in some other parks where that's just like way more important. So for Bryce Canyon, it's not necessary to be in the park, but if you want to be right on the rim, it's pretty cool to stay in the lodge. Another option for being really close to the rim is the North Campground, which is right over here. So again, you can see there's a little pathway that just takes you right to the rim, and the hoodoos and everything are all down in here. So this campground is a really great option. And then the other campground in the park is the Sunset Campground, and this one's just right over here. It's a little bit further from the rim, but it's not that far from the rim. Everything's pretty close together. Going back to this map, so here we have the main stuff at the amphitheater that I just talked about, and then Bryce Canyon City, Ruby's, stuff like that is right here. Another option is to continue on Highway 12 and to go down the hill, and here you'll find the small town of Tropic. It takes about 10 to 15 minutes to drive from Tropic to the Bryce Canyon entrance, so it's not too bad. There are a lot of Airbnbs in Tropic. There's some good restaurants that we really like to go to. I would say the food in Tropic is better than what you can find in Bryce Canyon City in general. And so we often find ourselves down in Tropic anyway for dinner. But it's not that far from the park. And so that's a really good option as well. Another place that a lot of people stay is Panguitch, which is out here. And so Panguitch, it takes about 35 minutes to drive from Panguitch to Bryce Canyon National Park. Panguitch is fine to stay in. You will typically find cheaper hotels in Panguitch because it is a little bit further out. I don't really like to stay there just because I don't see the point of adding in that extra drive time every day. Especially when it's not that much cheaper to stay in Panguitch than it is to stay in, say, Tropic. So typically I will always look in either the park, Bryce Canyon City, or Tropic first. And then if I'm not finding what I want in any of those places, I might take a look at Panguitch. But like I said, we basically never stay there. I can usually find pretty good deals in closer locations to the park. One question I get a lot of, and something that I just try to nip in the bud as quickly as I can, is should I stay in one hotel or one location for visiting both Zion National Park and Bryce Canyon National Park? And the big answer to that question for me is absolutely not. Don't try to stay in one place for both parks. They're separated by about an hour and a half if you're going out the Zion East entrance and going up to Bryce Canyon. And the Zion East entrance, just there's not a lot of like the main activities in Zion are right there. And so even though Google Maps might say it's like around an hour and a half, it's typically going to be closer to 2 hours to drive between those two parks. That's just too much driving. If you want to see Zion and Bryce Canyon in the same trip, then I highly recommend just booking your hotel at Zion and then moving up to Bryce Canyon and staying near Bryce Canyon. It just cuts down a ton of the drive time, and I think it just makes way more sense to do that. We never stay in one place to go to both parks. It's too much driving. Now it's time for the good stuff. Let's talk about the best things to do while you are here. And disclaimer, I have a full video about the things that you absolutely don't want to miss on your first visit to Bryce Canyon. So I would watch that video for more information about all these places. In this video, I just want to mention a few of my favorite things that you'll definitely want to do while you're here. If you go to dirtinmyshoes.com, you'll find this huge master list of things to do. And so I have it broken down by category. I have the top things to do with kids. If you don't want to hike, if you go during the winter. So let's click on things to do with kids. Then it takes you and gives you ideas for my favorite things to do with kids. So that article is a really good reference to just get tons of ideas for the type of trip that you want to take. For me, I am a hiker, and so when I go to Bryce Canyon, my number one thing to do is to hike in this park. And the nice thing is that it doesn't really matter what your ability level is. There is definitely a cool trail for you in this park. So my number one absolute favorite trail in Bryce Canyon, and let's be honest, this also probably applies to pretty much any national park in Utah. It is just one of my top favorite trails in any of these national parks. But that is what's called the Figure 8. And what the Figure 8 route is it takes you on the Navajo Loop, which is a really popular trail in Bryce. And then it takes you on the Peekaboo Loop, which is a much less popular trail, but one of the best, I think. And then at the end, it links you to the Queen's Garden Trail, which is the easiest amphitheater trail in Bryce Canyon. So with the Figure 8, you're hitting 3 of the most popular, most beautiful trails through the hoodoos that you possibly can go on. And you get to do it all in one route. So it is pretty challenging. It will take you a good portion of your day, at least 4 hours or so, to do all 3 of these trails. But you get to see the best of Bryce Canyon on those trails. If you want to shorten it, you can shorten it to about 3 miles round trip by cutting out the Peekaboo Loop. And this is known as the Navajo Loop Queen's Garden Trail. And so that is the number one most popular route to take through the hoodoos, is to do both of those main trails. I recommend going down the Navajo Loop and into Wall Street, which is just this amazing crack between the hoodoos that you get to walk through. And the hoodoos are just going up so tall, and you're looking up and around, and you're all enclosed because you're going in between these giant hoodoos. It's so impressive. It's one of the coolest parts of this park. So I like to go down that. And then at the bottom of the amphitheater, that's when you can catch the trail to the Queen's Garden. And the Queen's Garden is really nice. It takes you through some lesser formed hoodoos, some newer hoodoos, and it takes you out of the amphitheater in the easiest way possible. So the Queen's Garden is less steep than the Navajo Loop, and that's why I personally prefer to go down the Wall Street side of the Navajo Loop and then up the Queen's Garden Trail. It is worth mentioning that if you don't want to hike the full Figure 8, if you can't do the Peekaboo Loop, because that adds on a lot of mileage and a lot of elevation gain, it is pretty challenging. You can actually take a horseback ride along the Peekaboo Loop. So that is an option in this park. If you want to sign up for a horseback riding tour, they can take you on the Peekaboo Loop, so you can still see it even if you don't want to hike it. The other thing that you definitely don't want to miss is the Rim Trail. And the Rim Trail goes from Fairyland Point, which is the far north part of the park, and follows the Bryce Canyon Amphitheater like right at the edge, all the way up to Bryce Point, which is, as I said, my favorite viewpoint of this park. So that's really cool. It's a long stretch of trail, but you absolutely don't have to do the whole thing. You can just pick a section between viewpoints and hike that. There are some sections that very few people do, and so if you're looking for some solitude, there's some good options there. But the main part of the Rim Trail that a lot of people like to do is a paved portion between sunrise and sunset points. So that's a really good option if you want to stretch your legs, but you don't want to do a big hike, but you still want to have great views. That section of the Rim Trail is awesome for that. It's wheelchair accessible because it's paved and mostly flat, That is the only section of the rim trail that allows dogs. So you can have your dog on a leash between sunrise and sunset points. And so that's a really heavily used part of the rim trail, but it's beautiful. You see some really cool stuff. There's benches along the way. It's just a really nice way to explore the amphitheater. You'll definitely want to hit all those amphitheater viewpoints too. Don't skip out on those because the views change from every different viewpoint. And so no two viewpoints look the same. You're changing elevation, you're seeing different hoodoos. The vantage point is just totally different. So that's great. As I mentioned before, if you have some extra time, it is worth going down the scenic drive and seeing more of the grand staircase area. That's very impressive. I also really like hiking to Mossy Cave and the waterfall that is down. It's along the highway down as you're going into tropics. So that's another really popular part of Bryce, but it's a cool spot. Lastly, and I will say this, there is one more trail that is super cool that goes down into the amphitheater, but it's a less visited part of the park. It's a long trail. Most people don't hike this trail, and that is the Fairyland Loop. And the Fairyland Loop is awesome. I love this trail. It is so magical down there. You'll probably only see a few groups of people as you get further along in this trail. It just stays really quiet, and it's one of my favorite ways to experience Bryce Canyon. However, if you only have time to do one long trail, I would do the figure eight first and then do Fairyland hopefully the next time you come back. Let's talk about what your day is going to look like as you're exploring Bryce Canyon, what you're going to encounter, what to expect, how it's going to feel. So let's jump in. I want to show you the map and kind of give you a better orientation into what to expect. Okay, so here's our enlarged map of the Bryce Canyon Amphitheater area. Again, this is the most popular area of the park. And so you're coming into the park from here. And Bryce Canyon City is just right here. It's just right outside of the park. So that's really convenient. You'll come in, you'll hit the visitor center. That's where you can get water, you can use the bathroom, you can get your passport stamped, all of that. You can talk to a ranger. And then as you keep driving, this is when you'll hit those amphitheater viewpoints. So you'll come up here and you can come to Sunrise Point and park right here. This is also where the lodge is. The nice thing about Bryce Canyon is there are amenities right here in this area. And so if you're at the amphitheater, you're never too far from a water filling station or restrooms or picnic areas, anything like that. You can see all of those are just sprinkled everywhere in this area. You might also notice these little icons, these shuttle bus icons. That's because Bryce Canyon does run a shuttle bus during the busy summer months. This shuttle is not required. You can take it if you want, especially if you're getting to the park later in the day, you're going to want to take that. And so you'll see down here, they have these shuttle bus stops and how to use the shuttle. I don't typically use the shuttle a whole lot while I'm in Bryce Canyon because I know how to structure my schedule so that I just don't have to rely on it. I am able to get parking everywhere that I want to get parking. So I will use it if it's kind of more in the middle of the day and I just want to pop out to a viewpoint or something like that, and I know there's not going to be parking at that viewpoint. Then you park across the street from the visitor center and you can catch the shuttle from there. You'll also notice on this shuttle schedule that the shuttle does do a loop outside of the park in Bryce Canyon City as well. So if you're staying in one of these hotels, the Best Western Plus, Ruby's Inn, any of that, then you actually can just catch the shuttle right from your lodging. And that can be really convenient, again, especially if you're not wanting to get up earlier or you're not able to get into the park at a good time of day and no parking is going to be available for you, then that shuttle is a really good option. It runs about every 10 to 15 minutes and takes you to the most popular viewpoints at the amphitheater and to the lodge and the campgrounds and things like that. So you can definitely take that if you want. Okay, going beyond this main amphitheater area, this is where you can catch the park's scenic drive, which is this drive out here. And it takes you still along the amphitheater, but there's just not that many hoodoos out here. And so the views are totally different than what you get over here. I'm going to come down to this map of the rest of the scenic drive. That other one didn't show the whole thing. So you'll keep driving the scenic drive. Natural Bridge is super cool. I really like that one. It's like an arch in a hoodoo. So that's a fun stop. Some of these are just little quiet stops that a lot of people don't go to. So I like to spend a few hours out here just getting away from the crowds and seeing something different. If you go all the way out here to Yovimpa Point and Rainbow Point, this is where you'll get just awesome views of the Grand Staircase. There's the Bristol Cone Loop Trail if you want to see some ancient, old, like thousands of year old Bristol Cone pines. It's really, really cool to see those trees. Those are some of our favorite trees to see in any national park, so we really like that loop. But otherwise, it's just a really nice, totally different area of Bryce Canyon. You will want to note, however, that along the scenic drive, there are a few pit toilets. There's a picnic area out here, but there is not water filling stations, and so you'll want to bring all the water that you need for the time that you're going to be out along the scenic drive. The last thing that I absolutely have to mention is that while you are at Bryce Canyon, absolutely plan in time to do some stargazing. This park is just world renowned for its stargazing. The stars that you can see from here are probably more than you've ever seen in your entire life. A lot of times they do ranger programs around the night sky, and they'll get telescopes out and they'll show you stuff. And so it's just a really, really cool park for stargazing. So definitely plan that into your schedule. The skies are so clear. You're at such a high elevation. There's hardly any light pollution. And so you'll definitely want to do some stargazing while you're here. One more important tip before I wrap up this video is that you definitely are going to want to bring a jacket. You're going to want to bring layers. You're going to want to be able to change what you're wearing in and out throughout the day as you're hiking here, because sometimes when you're on the rim, it can be cool and windy. Sometimes it's a little bit rainy. The weather can change because you're at such a high elevation. And then you'll drop down into the amphitheater and it will get hotter. You might not want your jacket anymore. So just make sure you bring some good like moisture wicking layers to take on and off as you travel throughout the different elevations of this park. All right, my friends, thank you for trip planning to Bryce Canyon with me today. If you need any more help with anything, I have the Dirt in My Shoes Bryce Canyon Itinerary that will walk you through everything. You don't need to do any planning on your own. Or I have more videos and more posts either here on the YouTube channel or at dirtinmyshoes.com. So I can't wait for you to explore Bryce Canyon, and happy trails.